I know what you're attempting to insinuate, but there's
I'll
been no
take that as a
policy
no.
change and there is no policy.
Mr. Secretary, have you ever worn a MAGA hat in front of the troops?
I own plenty of MAGA hats, but I don't.
Have you ever
know that I
worn
have.
one in front of the troops at an official event? I don't
I'm
believe
aware
so.
of.
I don't believe so. Do you think it's appropriate for the President of the United States to wear political merchandise, including a MAGA hat, at official events, including West Point commencement?
The Commander-in-Chief
Yes or no?
can wear.
I have to say this on the record. I think your tenure as Secretary of Defense has been shameful and weak, and you should resign.
What we just witnessed was not merely a theatrical exchange. It served as a critical warning shot, a profound gut check for the state of American democracy. When Congressman Pat Ryan confronted Secretary Hegseth, he was not engaging in trivial nitpicking. Rather, he was pinpointing a fundamental and pressing danger. The core issue at stake is the troubling potential for the U.S. military to transition from its traditional role as a protector of the Constitution to functioning as a political arm. This shift poses significant risks to the integrity of our democratic institutions and the principles that underpin them. The military's primary duty is to safeguard the nation and uphold democratic values, not to become entangled in partisan politics. As citizens, we must remain vigilant against any encroachments that blur these essential lines. The implications of such a transformation could be dire, threatening not only the balance of power, but also the very fabric of our democracy itself.
We have all worn the uniform. We've all served in combat. We all love our country. We all revere our troops. And I really want to speak with you both, not as partisans, but as patriots. And I want to talk specifically about the events at Fort Bragg the other day. General Kane, I want to start with you. As a junior officer, were you ever required to make a pledge of political loyalty? Yes or no?
Sir, as you know, we're
General,
an apolitical
I have limited
military,
time.
so, no.
Thank you. At any time in your 30-plus years of incredibly distinguished service, did you have to make a pledge of partisan or political loyalty?
No, sir.
Thank you. Did you ever serve in any unit or command at any level where service members were required to make a pledge of political loyalty?
No, sir.
Thank you. And I want to commend you. You've been on the record on this, including in your confirmation hearings where you clarified, quote, "I've never worn any political merchandise or said anything to that effect." I appreciate that. That is the standard, and commend you for saying so and continuing to model that.
What you just saw wasn't a routine oversight moment. It was a soldier calling out his own. Pat Ryan wasn't speaking as a politician. He was speaking as a combat veteran who still believes the oath matters. The question he asked, whether soldiers should ever be forced to pledge political loyalty, cut straight to the core of what separates a democracy's military from a dictator's army. And when Pete Hegseth hesitated, when he searched for words instead of giving the obvious no, the silence was deafening. Because for anyone who's ever worn the uniform, the answer isn't complicated. Loyalty belongs to the Constitution, not a campaign. The hesitation revealed something deeper, a moral drift inside the institution that once prided itself on staying above politics. Ryan's tone wasn't outrage. It was heartbreak. He's watched young soldiers sign up believing in the same values he fought for, only to see those ideals blurred by slogans and partisanship. His message was simple but seismic. The uniform is sacred. Don't turn it into a political costume.
General Kane, one last question for you. Should soldiers have to pledge political loyalty to participate in an event with our Commander-in-Chief? Yes or no, please.
Sir, I'm not, first, no. I'm not aware of any time in history that soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines have been asked to do that. I think.
I'm sorry, General. I do want to, just in the interest of time, I want to talk about what happened at Fort Bragg 2 days ago. There was guidance put out, and this has been verified by multiple independent news outlets, saying, quote, these are to the soldiers of the 18th Airborne Corps and the U.S. Army. If soldiers have political views that are in opposition to the current administration, then they need to speak with their leadership and get swapped out. This is swapped out of the event with the president. In addition, in an incredibly disturbing incident, there was a pop-up shop selling MAGA merchandise on post at Fort Bragg. And to summarize this, there was a commander from Bragg who said on the record, quote, "This has been a bad week for the Army. for anyone who cares about us being a neutral institution. This was shameful. If those are the facts, and I know the Army is investigating at least the MAGA pop-up shop, is that appropriate, General Kane?
Sir, I haven't seen any of these reports. You know, I'm not familiar with them, but as I mentioned earlier and in my confirmation hearing, you know, the nation demands a apolitical, nonpartisan military.
Once Fort Bragg entered the conversation, everything changed. What had started as policy oversight turned into a gut check for the entire U.S. Army. Ryan cited verified reports of pop-up stands selling MAGA gear on base and internal guidance telling troops to swap out if their politics clashed with the administration. For a soldier like Ryan, that wasn't just inappropriate, it was unthinkable. He knows what political division can do to unit cohesion. He's seen what happens when soldiers start questioning whether their leadership serves the country or a campaign. That's why his voice shook, not with anger, but with disbelief. These weren't hypotheticals. These were orders that had allegedly reached America's most storied airborne corps. Hegseth's deflections, denying, redirecting, insisting he hadn't seen the reports only deepened the rift. Ryan wasn't buying it, and neither was anyone watching who understands the chain of command. Because once politics enters the barracks, discipline leaves. This was no longer about optics. It was about survival of trust, of neutrality, of the principle that the flag belongs to everyone, not just those wearing the right hat.
I appreciate you saying that and happy to share those reports. Secretary Hegseth, are you familiar with DoD Directive 1344.10? Political activities of the members of the armed forces?
Well, first off, I don't buy into your
yes or no?
insinuation
Are you familiar
that pledges
with-
are being done under this administration. That's
I reclaim my
insinuation.
time. Are you familiar with this DoD directive?
There's never one time in my service or in this
Mr.
Defense
Secretary,
Department.
will you please answer
I'm answering your
these
question
questions?
where politics has been considered for service members.
Are you familiar with this directive? Yes or no?
Which directive?
DoD Directive 1344.10. I'm happy to provide you a copy. There's even a one-page red and green cheat sheet. Are you familiar with it? This is the same directive from when we were all in uniform.
I'm sure I am.
Has anything changed in that directive under your guidance, given what happened 2 days ago at Fort Bragg? Is there a new policy change that we're not aware of?
Again, I totally reject your insinuation.
Is there a policy change to DoD Directive 1344.10?
I know what you're attempting to insinuate, but there's
I'll
been no
take that as a
policy
no.
change and there is no policy.
Mr. Secretary, have you ever worn a MAGA hat in front of the troops?
I own plenty of MAGA hats, but I don't.
Have you
know
ever
that I
worn
have.
one in front of the troops at an official event? I don't
I'm
believe
aware
so.
of.
I don't believe so. Do you think it's appropriate for the President of the United States to wear political merchandise, including a MAGA hat, at official events, including West Point commencement?
The Commander-in-Chief
Yes or no?
can wear whatever hat he wants, to include the phrase, "Make America Great Again," because I would like to
you
make
think
America
that's-
great again as well.
So you think that's appropriate?
The Commander-in-Chief has the right, in front of his troops, to wear whatever he'd like.
Okay, I strongly disagree with you. And I urge you both, especially you, General Kane, as we see an increasingly political rhetoric, including from the Secretary, to please, for the good of our troops, this is an incredibly difficult moment, and we need leaders like you to continue to echo the apolitical nature. I have 12 seconds. Mr. Secretary, I don't say this lightly. I have to say this on the record. I think your tenure as Secretary of Defense has been shameful and weak, and you should resign.
There are moments in public life that jolt the nation awake, moments when a single exchange cuts through the noise and forces us to confront what's really at stake. Congressman Pat Ryan's confrontation with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was one of those moments. It wasn't about partisanship. It wasn't about scoring points for the evening news. It was a gut check, a test of whether the most powerful military on earth still answers to the Constitution or to politics. When Ryan leaned in, the room went silent. The tension was electric, the kind that only happens when truth collides head-on with power. Because what he was really asking was simple, almost painfully simple. Do we still have an apolitical military? This wasn't theoretical. History shows what happens when nations forget that line. When soldiers start pledging loyalty not to their country but to a political faction, democracies don't fall from external attack. They rot from within. And Ryan knew it. His voice carried the weight of every veteran who has ever sworn an oath, not to a man, but to a living document, the Constitution of the United States. He wasn't grandstanding. He was pleading, as a soldier, as a patriot, as someone who has seen what happens when politics seeps into the chain of command. Because once that line blurs, once the uniform becomes a campaign symbol instead of a national one, the republic itself trembles. Think about what that means in human terms. In combat, trust isn't a slogan, it's survival. A platoon functions because every soldier believes their orders come from lawful authority, not political whim. If that faith cracks, if a soldier starts wondering whether speaking up will brand them disloyal, the mission falters. Hesitation becomes deadly. That's what Ryan was defending. That invisible thread of trust woven through every rank and every branch. It's what makes a unit more than armed individuals. It makes them a family. When Hegseth hesitated to give a clear no, when asked if troops should ever pledge political loyalty, that hesitation wasn't procedural. It was existential. Because every second of silence felt like an answer of its own. The crowd could feel it. For veterans watching at home, it was chilling. You could almost hear the collective question ripple across the country. Why can't the Secretary of Defense simply say the obvious? That soldiers owe loyalty to no politician. Then Ryan shifted from principle to proof. He brought up Fort Bragg, America's beating military heart, and what allegedly unfolded there. A pop-up store selling MAGA merchandise on base. Internal guidance telling troops who disagreed with the administration to swap out of the president's event. For civilians, that might sound trivial. A hat, a phrase, a photo op. But for anyone who's worn the uniform, it's seismic. The military doesn't do politics. Not publicly, not privately, not on duty. Because once the commander-in-chief's campaign slogan shows up in the barracks, unity fractures. Soldiers begin wondering who is truly in and who is suspect. Ryan's tone shifted from calm to disbelief. He wasn't just reciting headlines. He was reliving the anxiety of every officer who has ever fought to keep politics out of the barracks. His voice carried an undercurrent of sorrow, because he knew what it meant if those reports were true. When Hegseth deflected, claiming ignorance of the reports, it landed like a dodge, not a defense. You could see Ryan's frustration harden. His message was clear. Ignoring a problem this serious is not leadership. It's negligence. He reminded everyone that neutrality isn't weakness. It's armor. The apolitical stance of the armed forces isn't optional. It's sacred. Ryan returned to the oath. Those 37 words that every soldier memorizes before they ever touch a weapon. They don't swear to a president, a flag, or a political party. They swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That phrase, against all enemies, foreign and domestic, means something different to those who've served. It isn't metaphorical. It's a daily responsibility. And when the threat becomes internal, when it's the corrosion of trust itself, defending the Constitution means speaking out, even against your own chain of command. That's what Ryan did. His words reminded the country that the guardrails protecting democracy aren't written in marble. They're upheld by people, by choices, by courage. The Department of Defense directive he cited, 1344.10, wasn't trivia. It's the legal firewall preventing military personnel from engaging in partisan political activities while in uniform. It exists because generations before us saw what happens when armies become political armies. They watched democracies crumble. The question isn't abstract. History's warnings are vivid. Germany in the 1930s, Latin America during its coup, nations where generals wore party colors instead of national insignia. Once the military picks a side, there is no going back. Ryan's words were more than a critique. They were an autopsy in real time. He was dissecting a system that's slowly growing numb to ethical decay. Every vague answer, every "we'll review it later," every shrug when oversight calls, it's part of that erosion. He drew a line from partisanship at Fort Bragg to the broader threat of executive overreach, agencies quietly redrawing boundaries, officials sidestepping Congress, departments operating in the gray areas of authority. It's all connected, because every time an institution decides the rules don't apply to it, the foundation of democracy weakens just a little more. Ryan wasn't accusing one man. He was diagnosing a culture, one that confuses loyalty with obedience and politics with patriotism. By the time the questioning reached its climax, the tone in the room was electric. Ryan wasn't yelling he didn't need to. His control was the most devastating part. Every question cut sharper than the last. "Have you ever worn a MAGA hat in front of the troops?" "I own plenty," Hegseth replied, "but I don't believe I have." Do you think it's appropriate for the president to wear political merchandise at military events? The commander-in-chief can wear whatever he wants. And there it was the moment the air left the room, because Ryan wasn't asking about hats. He was asking about limits, about whether anyone in the administration still believes that symbolism matters. When he finally said the words, "Your tenure has been shameful and weak, and you should resign," it wasn't outrage for outrage's sake. It was a verdict, years in the making. You could see it on his face, the frustration of someone who once believed in the same chain of command, now forced to watch it twist under political pressure. This wasn't political theater, it was a reckoning. Ryan's confrontation tore open a wound the nation's been avoiding. The question isn't just whether politics has entered the military, it's whether the military can remain trusted once it does. The consequences are tangible. When neutrality erodes, so does recruitment. Young Americans watch the news and wonder, is this still an institution for everyone or only for those who share the right beliefs? When politics colors discipline, investigations get second-guessed. Promotions become suspect. Whistleblowers go silent. And when silence becomes culture, accountability dies. Ryan's warning wasn't an abstract civics lesson, it was a prediction. Lose public trust in the military, and everything built atop that trust begins to wobble, from alliances abroad to peace at home. Because America's strength has never been just firepower, it's been legitimacy, the belief, both at home and abroad, that our institutions answer to law, not ego. That's why Ryan's questioning carried such force. He was reminding the nation that Congress is not a spectator sport. Oversight isn't optional. It's the very thing that keeps power from consuming itself. Hearings like this are messy by design. They force light into places where secrecy thrives. They demand explanations when leaders would rather hide behind slogans. They're how democracy breathes. Ryan's demand for answers about Fort Bragg, about political neutrality, about respect for the oath wasn't just for the record. It was for every American who still believes accountability matters. Because if the people's representatives can't demand the truth from the Pentagon, then civilian control of the military, one of the most sacred pillars of our republic, is nothing more than a myth. At its heart, this wasn't a fight about policy. It was a fight about morality, about who we are when no one's watching. Ryan's frustration reflected something deeply American, a refusal to accept that the institutions built to protect us could ever become instruments of division. His voice carried the echo of every veteran who's ever saluted a flag, believing it stood for unity, not ideology. He reminded us that real strength doesn't come from partisan dominance. It comes from shared values, from knowing that even when we disagree, we stand under one Constitution. And that's what makes this moment so powerful and so dangerous. Because once leaders begin treating neutrality as optional, once truth becomes negotiable, it's not just policy that crumbles, it's the entire idea of America. This isn't the kind of story that ends when the cameras turn off. It's the kind that ripples outward through the ranks, through the media, through every citizen who wonders what their country is becoming. Ryan's confrontation should remind us of our own responsibility. Democracy isn't self-cleaning. It demands participation. It needs citizens who pay attention, who question power, who refuse to accept half answers when the truth is on the line. So ask yourself, do you believe the military should ever be politicized? Should soldiers have to navigate loyalty tests just to do their jobs? Should any official in any party get to blur the line between service and politics without consequence? Because those aren't rhetorical questions. They're the pulse check of a democracy under stress. If you believe the answer is no, that loyalty belongs to the Constitution and not to any campaign, then this is your call to stay engaged. Watch the hearings. Demand transparency. Hold your representatives accountable. Like, comment, and subscribe, not just to support this channel, but to keep these stories alive, to amplify the voices demanding truth in places where power hopes for silence. Because as Pat Ryan reminded the nation, democracy doesn't crumble in a single moment. It fades quietly when good people stop paying attention. So don't look away. Watch closely, because the next chapter in this story will decide whether the United States military remains what it was always meant to be, an instrument of defense, not division,